What's up, everybody? On today's show, we've been talking a lot about some great articles all throughout this offseason. Brad Crawford over 24/7 Sports, he's been writing them all. We figured, why not get him on the show? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It is great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And I teased it. Let's jump right into it. Our guy, Brad Crawford, 24/7 Sports, joins us now. And Brad, we've been enjoying all of your content over at 24/7. I would definitely encourage folks, if you're not a VIP, go become a VIP over at 24/7 so you can read all the great content Brad's been cranking out. How are you, man?
I'm doing pretty well, man. We started a Inside the SEC Intel column that I started last week, VIP only. And, of course, I have my annual post-spring rankings, post-spring top 25, position group rankings, what I'm hearing from coaches. So it's a busy time right now, man, with media days here in a few months and the 2024 expanded SEC about to lift off.
Well, I'm sure when you do these lists or these rankings, I'm sure you just have to turn the notifications off on your Twitter and your phone because
I have a rule. I never read the comments, man. Nah.
Well, let's start here, man. Before we get to it, I do want to get your quarterback rankings. We'll revisit that because that came out this week. But let's start off right here at the top. What's the biggest storyline in your mind as we head into the summer? I mean, is it as simple as say it's Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC? What's the biggest storyline in your mind for the Southeastern Conference?
Yeah, I think between the two newcomers, Texas and OU, and kind of which one of those programs is actually elite versus which one may struggle in the first season, that's big. Obviously, first time in more than a decade, Chris, that we don't have Nick Saban in the SEC anymore. He's going to be on our television sets on College Game Day, but he's no longer coach of the Crimson Tide. And then for me is this Ole Miss's year. Not only could they be playoff bound, but are the Rebels good enough to win the SEC? And I think this is the best roster in program history. That's no hyperbole. Even with Kim Dichie and Treadwell and Tunzel under Hugh Freeze, this roster that Lane Kiffin has assembled is really nasty. And I think probably 8 or 9 SEC teams are going to be ranked in that AP preseason poll in August.
Yeah, it's really weird, Brad. I've been doing a lot. I do weekly hits around the South, and it's so funny how we have to condition our minds still. I've had 3 different shows ask me in recent weeks, now who do you like in the East? Who do you like in the West? I'm going, guys, get that out of your mind. That's gone now. And in turn, it is a weird thing that it's like 10-2 is now the goal for so many teams because we assume you go 10-2, SEC, you're getting in. It's just weird that the goal for a lot of teams now isn't get to Atlanta. I mean, I'm sure you really want to, but like at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. If you don't get to Atlanta, you go to 10-2 and still make the playoffs.
I think 10, Chris, is the magic number for this season as far as win totals go if you want to get that expanded playoff because the SEC now, top to bottom, is so strong. You're going to play 5 or 6 top 25 teams, during that 12-game schedule. And I think it's probably beneficial for teams to go 10-2 and not make it to Atlanta and play the extra game, with a possible loss there. So I think Ole Miss schedule sets up for 10 wins. I think Missouri certainly sets up for a possible 10-win season. And obviously my 2 favorites right now are Georgia and Texas. And in my pre-spring bowl projections, I do have 4 SEC teams getting in that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, it's crazy to to think that way because again, I was against the whole automatic, you win your conference, you get in. I was against that. So let's just take the 12 best teams. The end of the season, the rankings 1 through 12, those are the 12 in. But we got to do the whole, well, what about Liberty? And what about this? And I was just like, all right, this is so stupid. But again, the people up top, they don't make all the smartest decisions all the time. It's funny, we talk about some of the big storylines, and you mentioned that. I do want to mention hot seat. I mean, we come into this season and talk about, God, Billy Napier. It's a brutal draw at Florida. Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Is it really just those 2, or do you think Shane Beamer? Do you think some other guys might kind of be on the hot seat this year?
Yeah, I think Clark Lee's a name where if he goes winless in the SEC for another season, he could maybe enter that scorching seat in late November. And then Shane Beamer's a guy that I think, heading into this season at South Carolina, did not get to bowl eligibility last year. Win total set at about 5.5 right now. Gamecocks did do a pretty good job in the portal, signed a top 10 class, but no longer have Spencer Rattler. They lost Juice Wells, lost Xavier Legette, first-round pick of the Carolina Panthers. So there's some questions in Columbia. But I do think Shane Beamer is going to last through 2024, regardless of this season's record. And then 2025 will be the sort of contract year for him. So I'm with you. Billy Napier and Sam Pittman are the two guys that I would put right now on the SEC hot seats. And, man, Florida's last 5 games, Texas, LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss, Florida State. Man, I don't even know if, Bo Schembechler or Lou Holtz or Joe Paterno can win those games.
Yeah, it's a tough ask. That's why it's like get all the wins you can earlier in the year if you're Billy Napier. I know you kind of did this a while back. You ranked some of the schedules and strength of schedule and all that. Who in your mind has the easiest path, or some of the teams that have the easiest path? I mean, we talk about Ole Miss and Missouri. It does seem like they got luck of the draw. Texas, I think it's a pretty navigatable schedule. Are those the teams you think kind of lucked out with this schedule where we have 16 teams yet you're not playing everybody?
Yeah, I think Texas's schedule compared to Oklahoma's, for instance, is very favorable based on the rosters coming back for both those teams. Texas obviously has a top 5 roster, elite there under Sarkisian. But Oklahoma, man, plays arguably the SEC's toughest schedule, not named Florida. I mean, OU, even out of conference, plays Tulane, a team that has a very good shot of getting that G5 bid in the playoffs. So Oklahoma's schedule's tough. And then, as you mentioned, Ole Miss and Missouri. Ole Miss's toughest game is probably Georgia and Oxford, a game that Ole Miss wasn't that competitive last year. Lane Kiffin said after that game that we have to recruit better at the line of scrimmage. The Rebels went and did that, bought a lot of players in the portal this offseason. So I think Ole Miss is a team that is probably going to be favored in 10 games this season, and Missouri as well. But, Missouri no longer is going to sort of fly under the cloak of anonymity anymore. They won 11 games last year under Drinkwitz. Now they're preseason top 10 after beating Ohio State in that year. So there's some pressure on Missouri to not only match last season's win total, but try and go above it.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating for Missouri and Ole Miss is like you break through and you get that double-digit win season. All right, pat on the back. Now go do it again. And it's like that's where you're bound. Somebody's going to take a step back. Like you can't keep doing that every year unless you're Nick Saban. So it's tough. I did want to tie this into, I saw a tweet you had the other day where you said, an unpopular SEC take. You think South Carolina's road game at Kentucky early in the season is going to be more arduous than the following week at home versus LSU? Well, I've seen kind of reading between the lines of some of the stuff you've written. You seem pretty bullish on this Kentucky team. You think Bush Hampton and this, the addition of Brock Vandergrift, that Kentucky's going to be a force to be reckoned with?
Yeah, as a bullish on Kentucky guy, my bullish is probably 7-5, maybe 8-win ceiling. I'm not taking UK to be a contender or anything, but I just think that this is going to be Lenora Sellers, Gamecock starting quarterback, his first career road start. Kroger Field has at times been a house of horrors for South Carolina. Road games the last 2 decades for the Gamecocks in the SEC have been really difficult. And then the LSU game, we don't have a kickoff time yet for that game, but if that's 7:45 under the lights at Williams-Brice, that's a tough environment to go win at, even if LSU's roster is, considerably more talented. But based on what I've heard in recent weeks, I think South Carolina has that game at Kentucky circled as one of its most important this season. And obviously LSU's trip to Columbia that following week is a huge game for both of those programs too.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the quarterbacks. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks coming up next. I know you put out your rankings. We're going to talk about that coming up next here on Locked On SEC. Quick reminder for our friends over at the GameTime app. Look, GameTime is the authorized ticket marketplace for the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Last-minute deals are up there for you. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sporting events. Save even more when you choose a section. Only GameTime choose the seats for you. They got the all-in prices. You toggle that feature, shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And it takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Continuing our conversation with Brad Crawford, 24/7 Sports. And if you missed it earlier this week, he put out his post-spring quarterback rankings in the SEC. And I'll just start here because I saw a lot of people on social media tweeting about it and all this. I know you said you ignore the notifications, but was there one you got more feedback on than any from just people talking?
Yeah, cycling through this, talking to assistant coaches, talking to some of our team site insiders who watch these guys live this spring, Chris, the toughest part of this for me, the ranking always is, you had the elite tier, the guys that you expect to be there, the Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, probably 2 top 10 picks in 2025. Then you got the mid tier. And then the bottom tier, I'd probably start at maybe Jackson Arnold through Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. All those final 6 guys are kind of interchangeable. So it was really tough. I got some flack ranking Lenora Sellers 15th at South Carolina. Called some flack ranking Graham Mertz higher than many of my readers thought I should. But, this time last year, man, I had Graham Mertz, the Florida quarterback, as the worst SEC quarterback. And then he came in and had 20 touchdowns and 3 picks and kind of carried that offense. So I do think Florida, especially Graham Mertz, he impressed me this spring because he was able to hold off DJ Lagway, the 5-star freshman who I've got as the top signal caller in this 2024 cycle. So Graham Mertz is a guy that I think his best football will be played this season. But as I mentioned before, Florida's schedule is so difficult that Graham Mertz can have a good year and the Gators still miss bowl season. But the SEC at the top, I think, is better than the ACC and Big Ten, those 1 through 5 guys at the quarterback spot.
Let me go old school for our older listeners like myself. I remember when Chris Leak was there, Tim Tebow came in, and he was so highly thought of. They said, we got to get this guy on the field somehow. They developed packages for him. A lot of the goal line, the famous jump pass against LSU. Is Billy Napier making a mistake not putting some packages in for DJ Lagway?
I think we are going to see DJ play this year, especially if Florida, has the danger zone where they're about 2-5 through the first half of the season. And Napier's got a coach for his job heading into November. Then you're going to kind of see the coaching staff move toward the future of the program, which is Lagway. I'm still surprised that Florida was able to keep him in this class. I know they lost some decommits there during the early period, but getting Lagway to stay committed as sort of the gem, that's big news for Napier. And like you said, I think he should have some packages this year. Certainly showed in the spring game, man. He has a heck of an arm back there.
As we look at these rankings, and you kind of talked about the upper tier and the lower tier, I don't know, maybe I'm just too close to this, Brad, and been studying a little bit too much and watching film on Taylon Green and Brock Vandegrift. Like, this almost feels like a better grouping overall of quarterbacks than we had last year. And I say that because Jalen Milroe didn't live up to what I thought he would be at Tennessee. Devin Leary didn't live up to what I thought he'd be at Kentucky. Like, I thought some of these guys kind of underachieved last year. Obviously, we had Jaden Daniels, who was the Heisman Trophy winner, and all this kind of stuff. But, like, this collectively, does this have a chance to be a better group, 1 through 16 than last year?
I think it does. And, you didn't mention Joe Milton. He was relatively a bust, too. And he was a guy that this time last year, he was top 5 in some mocks for 2024. Yep. And now there's talk about him possibly moving to tight end. So I think top to bottom, this is the SEC's best quarterback class in quite some time. I've covered the league since probably 2010-ish. And, the year with Tua Tagovailoa and kind of the guys behind him was really good. But this is a good cycle. But those top 5 guys, have to be elite, all-American, all-conference type players for this, league to kind of separate from the rest of the pack. Milroe's a guy that I think is going to be a very interesting watch. Is he the right fit for Kalen DeBoer's offense? Is he going to be asked to, throw the ball more than he's used to? Because we know that Milroe likes to, if that first read's covered, take off and run, which is his strong suit. But I don't know if that works out for DeBoer or not. So Ty Simpson behind him, he's a guy who could play a little bit as well.
Yeah, you're on the path. I'm putting my list of 10 hot takes for next season, Brad, and one of them is Ty Simpson takes over at some point and leads Bama to the playoff. That's so a hot take I'm working on. Don't steal it, all right? It's
I like it.
What about Auburn? Because I look at you putting Payton Thorne at number 14 there. Did Hugh Freeze make a mistake not bringing in another experienced quarterback to at least compete?
he said he didn't want to spend $1.5 million on a quarterback this cycle. Well, I can assure you that if there was one this cycle that he thought he could win 9 or 10 games with, Auburn would have gone after him. And, we've seen heightened Payton Thorne a couple of years ago at Michigan State, and we've seen mediocre, bad Payton Thorne last season at Auburn, where there were times, man, where on 3rd and 6, he couldn't hit a guy across the middle. And right now, I think coming out of spring, he's probably QB1 on the Plains because they didn't add a portal guy. So, yeah, Thorne's a guy that I sort of have in that 14 spot. Taylor Green just ahead of him at Arkansas, obviously now coached by Bobby Petrino. And really, Sam Pittman has put all of his eggs in the Taylor Green and Petrino basket. If this Boise State transfer does not work out and Arkansas can't move the ball and they can't block for Green, then it's going to be a rough year in Fayetteville.
We're a little biased. We had Taylor on the show a few weeks ago, and I just like the kid a lot. He's easy to root for, and he said the big sell was coming to play for Bobby Petrino because of all the quarterbacks he's coached. And it's like, if I'm Sam Pittman, I got nothing to lose. Look, they're already trying to fire me, so let's just let it all hang loose, and maybe we upset somebody, and we get to 6-6, win a bowl game, and who knows? It could be fascinating. A few more for you, Brad. Overall consensus, it feels like everybody and their brother is on board with Carson back. I had a Heisman ticket I got last summer in Vegas on him last year. I thought, there was a point in the season I was like, oh, this might pay off, and then it kind of tailed off. But, is that kind of consensus? Carson Beck's the best quarterback in the SEC this year, hands down?
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to, pick Georgia's starting quarterback as one of the Heisman finalists because chances are the Bulldogs are going to be a 11 or 12 win team, and that guy's going to have pretty good numbers. I do think being in Mike Bobo's offense may handcuff him just a bit because they're not a throw it deep downfield type passing attack. But Carson Beck's a guy with Quinn Ewers right behind him. Both those guys I think are elite prospects. I think we can see both those quarterbacks in the playoff. And then Jackson Dart sort of had a tough time deciding between Jackson Dart at 3 or Quinn Ewers in that spot because we know that Quinn Ewers' leash may not be as long as he wants it, but with Arch Manning behind him. And Arch Manning is so talented, 300 yards in the spring game, that I think we do see Arch Manning at some point this season not take over the starting role at Texas, but obviously, have a significant role in that offense. And right now, Texas's quarterback room, outside of Ohio State nationally, it's got to be the best in college football.
Yeah, well, luckily for Quinn Ewers, Dallas Turner is now in the NFL, that he can't knock him out of a game anymore because that's happened.
The dirtiest player in SEC football history, man.
But look, with Ewers, I think it's worth questioning. He's got a whole new receiving core. There's a big C word called chemistry that you got to develop. And I think we're all just assuming it's going to work. And certainly Sark is good enough offensive mind to make it work. But it's a lot to just assume that they're going to pick up right where Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell and Sanders and all those guys left off.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers is, one better thrown ball away in the corner of the end zone from beating Washington and appearing in that title game against Michigan last year. So I think Quinn, maybe his last throw that we saw on film, he's pretty anxious to play this final season in Texas and prove that he's going to be a top 10 pick. I like him a lot and certainly has a chance to supersede Carson Beck at the end of the year, the top of these rankings. But, Carson Beck's a guy that I think right now is most likely the top quarterback taken next spring. And if he has another good year in year 2 as Georgia's starting quarterback, he can get there.
Last one of your quarterback rankings here, Brad, and it's so funny. Look, I love Luther Burden. I love Mookie Cooper. I love all the weapons that Mizzou has. But I don't know. When I see Brady Cook as a top 5 quarterback in the SEC, it doesn't sit right with me. It makes me feel weird. I feel awkward about it. But, we do have to give this kid his due. He was awesome last year.
A lot of that speaks to Luther Burden coming back, too. And I know that Missouri's coaching staff was a little bit worried that, Luther Burden might be a go to the highest bidder type guy because, in my opinion, he's the best receiver in college football coming back in 2024. He's going to make Brady Cook, look real good on some of those deep routes. But, Cook's a guy, as you mentioned, before he won that starting job and he was battling in that competition, he was literally booed by his home fans for his inconsistent play. But, man, last year he did not show that. He's one of the most efficient passers in college football. Played pretty darn well against Ohio State there, too, at AT&T Stadium. So the guy right behind him, Tennessee quarterback, redshirt freshman Nico, he's a guy that I don't want to mispronounce it yet. I still got to learn that, just like I learned Tua Tagovailoa several years ago, But Nico has a chance, I think, to be closer to Hendon Hooker than he was Joe Milton. And if you're a Tennessee fan, you want to see Hendon Hooker type quarterback play and not Joe Milton type quarterback play if the Vols are going to be a legitimate contender this season.
And there's a video on our Locked On SEC Twitter I keep citing, and it was from the horse's mouth. Nico said, Nico Iamaleava. And so I said, I'm going with what he said. That's how he said his own name. I'm going to ride with that one. So we'll see.
Iamaleava, nice.
Last thing for you, Brad. And again, I love all the articles you wrote. I know you just dropped one on the 30 most impressive facilities around college football, and I think you got 14 of the SEC teams ranked in there. I've been to several. I'm just curious, which ones have you been to, and which ones kind of impressed you? Because I'll say this: LSU is pretty damn impressive with the sleeping areas that they have, but
pods, yeah.
Yeah, but A&M with the hot tubs with the TVs, that's impressive. I don't know. They're all great in my mind, but you've got Georgia at 3, Bama at 2, and Oregon at number 1. Is there one in your mind that you've seen that just really impresses the hell out of you?
Yeah, I went to an event at Oregon back when that facility first opened, which, man, it's almost been 10 years now, maybe 2017, 7 or so years. And to me, that is still the top-end facility. Oregon right now is building a new indoor practice field, which the one they currently have is less than 8 years old. And what are they doing? They're knocking it down and building another one. So it's the Phil Knight University out there, man. But Oregon right now is still top dog to me. Just seeing all the cleat combinations and helmets and uniforms, I was blown away, man. Bama's nice. South Carolina's pretty underrated. They were inside my top 10. And I got a buddy on Kansas's staff that when this new stadium and facilities built in Lawrence, that's going to be definitely a top 20 facility.
Yeah, and of course, Mizzou, they're doing renovations. It feels like every year somebody in the SEC is doing renovations because it's all about keeping up. You got to keep up with the Joneses. So it's fascinating to see. Brad, you do an awesome job, man. Thanks so much for taking some time to join us tonight. And 24/7 Sports, of course, is where you can read all Brad's stuff and encourage everybody. Become a VIP. You can get that SEC insider information and much, much more as the season gets closer. Brad, always good to talk, man. We'll see you at SEC Media Days, all right?
Thanks a lot, Chris. See you then, man.
All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC. Keep it locked right here. I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It is winner take all right now in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and much, much more. Of course, they got all the college football action coming to you this fall, and you can get in on some of the early betting lines there, even some over-under win totals and much more. Again, that is FanDuel.com/locked-on. If you've never signed up before, go check them out. Take advantage of that great $150 in bonus bets offer. Again, it's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Go make every playoff shot count. It is FanDuel, and they are America's #1 sports book. Go get signed up today. All right, continue on here. Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And shout out to those of you out there for being our everydayers, checking us out each and every day. And a reminder, you can check out Locked On Sports today. If you want all the biggest sports stories happening around the sports world, you can find it on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV app. Again, it is Locked On Sports today. All right, we got plenty to jump into. Appreciate Brad Crawford for joining us, but let's get you guys caught up on the news going on around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch! Around the conference.
And we start over at Florida. As we told you earlier in the week, they were adding or expecting to add a potential significant piece, and he was in for a visit, and then he committed. Former 5-star prospect Cormani McClain, defensive back who entered the portal this offseason after spending his freshman season at Colorado. He was once a number 13 overall player, the #1 corner in the class of 2023, according to 24/7 Sports. He's a native of Florida. A lot of people thought at one time he was expected to commit to the Gators. Instead, he committed to Miami, and then on signing day, flipped to Deion Sanders in Colorado. Had some issues with Deion last year at Colorado and hit the portal, and now he's headed to the Florida Gators. So Billy Napier and that staff will try to get him back on the right path. But Florida has added 14 transfer portal commits this offseason. Class ranks number 8 nationally, and Cormani McClain, a big part of that. Over at LSU, they added some experienced production on their defensive line, bringing in Jay'viar Suggs from Grand Valley State. He's a Michigan native, comes to the SEC after 5 seasons at Grand Valley. Over the last 2 seasons, he played in 22 games, had 21 tackles total each year, so 42 total, 8 sacks in his time there. Last season, he was also credited with some pass breakups and forced fumbles as well. Had limited down to a Final Four that included Michigan, Wisconsin, Kentucky, and LSU, and committed to Brian Kelly and the Tigers. Now, LSU did notably miss out on Simeon Barrow from Michigan State. He chose Miami, and then Dominic Williams from TCU chose Oklahoma. So they needed some help on the interior of their defensive line, and now they get it in the Grand Valley State former defensive lineman. 6'3", 282 pounds. LSU reportedly at 82 scholarships now, so still got some more room if they want to add to that roster in the portal. Also, another note on LSU, they are reportedly working to schedule a game overseas in the near future, possibly could be in Ireland, according to some reports. Brian Kelly telling reporters LSU has hired the services of a travel company to put together a game overseas. He said it's the same company that helped organize Florida State's upcoming game against Georgia Tech in Ireland. So we'll see if that is where LSU goes. Now, Ireland has become a popular site for those Week 0 games, part of the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Last season, Notre Dame and Navy played in Dublin to kick off the year. This year, it'll be Florida State and Georgia Tech. Now, Kansas State and Iowa State are scheduled to play in that one next year in 2025. Good Lord, that's Kansas State and Iowa State. Ugh. And then in 2027, Pitt and Wisconsin scheduled to play in this. Are they trying to figure out if they can get the worst games ever? Now, 2026 appears to be open. Now, LSU, they couldn't do this next year. Next season, they're scheduled to play at Clemson to start next year in 2025. And we'll see if they end up having the return visit against Clemson in 2026 in Baton Rouge. But, you know, if you're going to open with Clemson in Baton Rouge in 2026, do you really want to go play a Week 0 game in Ireland against a decent opponent? So we'll see what happens there. But again, LSU and Brian Kelly exploring, taking the Tigers overseas. Look, no doubt, LSU fans like to drink. They'll head over to Dublin and kill a bunch of Guinness. And, you know, they've been famous for drinking some bars dry in some of these college stadiums like West Virginia years ago and Vanderbilt. Curious to see if LSU could drink Dublin dry. I doubt they could. All right, in other news, over in Heisman conversation, Ryan McGee at ESPN put up his top 10 preseason Heisman Trophy candidates up at ESPN.com for this upcoming season. 5 players, all quarterbacks from the SEC, making the cut. Georgia's Carson Beck in the number 1 spot. Texas's Quinn Ewers at number 3. Alabama's Jalen Milroe comes at number 4. Ole Miss's Jackson Dart at number 6. And Garrett Nussmeier from LSU was the final SEC player to be mentioned in the top 10. So pretty interesting. If Garrett Nussmeier were to win the Heisman this year, LSU would become the first school to have back-to-back Heisman winners since Alabama did it in 2020 and 2021 with Devontae Smith and Bryce Young. But LSU would also become, I mean, that would be LSU's 3rd Heisman winner in the past 6 seasons, joining Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels. So pretty funny for LSU. About a decade plus ago, they were known for, you know, couldn't develop a quarterback. They had guys like Jordan Jefferson and Anthony Jennings throwing for like 70 yards a game sometimes. And now 2 Heisman Trophy winners. We'll see if Garrett Nussmeier can have that type of season and take them to an even higher level. I mean, there's a reason they got Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback commit in the country, coming in next year. Crazy that LSU has jumped into that territory. All right, a quick note here. EA Sports College Football 2025, just 2 months away from coming out. The long-awaited game officially released a release date of July 19th. It'll come out on PlayStation 5 and Xbox, and they released their official cover of the video game. It will feature Michigan running back Donovan Edwards, Colorado defensive back and wide receiver Travis Hunter, and Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers from the SEC. Now, in addition to that, the combo cover, you'll have more helmets in the background, and it includes Jalen Milroe, Alabama quarterback, and Carson Beck, Georgia quarterback. So a little bit extra there. You'll also see Quinshon Judkins, former Ole Miss running back, now Ohio State running back, on that cover. But EA Sports expected to put a full teaser reveal of the game on today. So check that out. And one more nugget in here, an SEC hoops nugget, as Kentucky has turned to the transfer portal for an 11th scholarship player for Mark Pope's debut season in Lexington. Ainsley Almanor is going to transfer into Kentucky. He was played at Fairleigh Dickinson. Announced on Thursday he's heading to Kentucky. 6'7", 219 pounds. He's a forward. Spent 3 seasons as a bench contributor as a freshman and regular starter the past 2 seasons at Fairleigh Dickinson. This past year he played in 32 games, made 31 starts, averaged 16.5 points over 32 minutes, shooting 43% from the field, 39% from 3, at 162 rebounds, 54 assists, 22 blocks. So nice contributor there for Kentucky. But that means out of the portal they have Amari Williams from Drexel, Lamont Butler from San Diego State, Otega Owe from Oklahoma, Andrew Carr from Wake Forest, Brandon Garrison, Oklahoma State, Kobe Bray from Dayton, and Kirk Kriisa from West Virginia. You also have incoming freshmen Colin Chandler, Travis Perry, and Trent Noah. Man, it is a full overhaul of a roster at Kentucky. Buy a program if you're heading to next basketball season. You are going to need it. And that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Coming back Monday on the show, we'll be recapping all the action from the weekend. And again, thank you guys for making us your first listen. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On's first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, covering all the biggest news in the sports world 24/7 there for you. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys on Monday.